Hey there, I'm Brady Forrest. Thank you all for coming out. This is the fourth or fifth Ignite at I.O., and I think it's the biggest one. At least this year, we won't be hearing Jane's Addiction play during our Ignite. So thanks for coming out. We've got 12 great speakers. We're going to hear from a number of Googlers. And in case you've never actually been to an Ignite before, if you don't know what Ignite is, it's a geek event that has spread around the world. And it gives people a chance to share their ideas and share their passions in a highly structured format that really lets them to kind of bump up against constraints and become just a bit more creative in how they present their ideas. So each of these speakers gets 20 slides that auto-advance every 15 seconds for a total of just 5 minutes. So they've had to really condense their ideas down and really be able to drive them home.
Hi, good evening. Everybody here, I'm sure, has a question that they dread answering. Whether it's at a conference or a party or a friend's wedding, it comes at you from nowhere and there's nothing you can do about it. So for me, that question is, what do you do? So the conversation will go something like this. What do you do? I'm a composer. Oh, well, what do you play? Oh, I don't really play an instrument. Okay, so what kind of songs do you write? Well, I don't really write songs. Okay, so what kind of music do you write then? Well, I'm not sure I'd really call it music. Interesting. I'm just going to go and get a drink. So the conversation doesn't always have to go like that, but generally speaking, if you want to have a nice quiet time at a party, tell them you're an avant-garde composer. So avant-garde composers have historically had this image of themselves as being on the bleeding edge of musical frontiers and breaking down barriers, sticking it to the man, all this kind of thing. But audiences, at least these days, have a sort of slightly different idea of avant-garde composers, definitely less than heroic. And that's a shame, because there's a huge amount of really great experimental music out there. But the stigma sort of still remains. So why is that? Well, if we rewind a couple of hundred years, if you wanted to hear new music, you'd go to a concert. It was all about concerts and audiences and premieres. But as soon as recording technology came around, and I love recording technology, by the way, composers could then experiment till the cows come home in their studios, and they didn't have to show it for an audience. So studios became like laboratories. But the problem was that composers thought they could take that stuff out on the road, and it didn't go down so well with the public. So against that backdrop of experimental music, I'm going to share a few of my experiences with you. So I've been very interested the last couple of years in the relationship between music and the brain. So my wife's a neuroscientist, my drinking buddy's a neuroscientist, there's just brains all over the place. So I got to asking, well, what can we do with this? So I started working with the EEG signal and neurofeedback, and started developing with some neuroscientist friends what's called a BCMI, or brain-computer music interface. EEG is great. It's cheap, it's non-invasive, it looks cool. And so we started working on an installation that we got approached to do involving the internet. And we came up with this idea of redoing a classic piece from 1965. We called ours Music for Online Performer. So what we did was we streamed the live brain signal split between the 4 frequency bands over the web via open sound control to the UK into a concert space, which was hooked up to an Arduino interface that controlled robots that would play acoustic instruments in real time. We also had a live stream chat room going on where people could log in, they could comment. We even took requests. It was like, you know, more drum, okay, increase beta power. So it was a complex dynamic system which was kind of multi-level with social interaction and robots on the other side of the planet. So how did it sound? Well, I have to tell you, it sounded pretty terrible. It really didn't sound that good, and that wasn't the point. The point was that we wanted to show that we could connect all this stuff together and that it could work over an hour-long performance with various different time zones. But at the end of the day, this was a music concert, and our robots ended up sounding like that candy-making machine out of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So it was great proof of concept, but as a piece of music, maybe not so great. So we as artists, I think, want to get from proof of concept to what I would call proof of context. So what do I mean by that? basically that you as the audience shouldn't have to bring the context in with you. You shouldn't have to have read a book on experimental music in order to be able to kind of appreciate the output. So in our case, the context was a quartet of robots. Now, in a real quartet, the instrumentalists listen to each other, and they kind of put it all together, and they vibe off each other. So if we had just tweaked the algorithm a little bit so that the signals were listening to each other and not all playing at the same time, it would have had a better sort of musical context. So just to demonstrate the power of context a little bit, this is Bob. He's a theremin. And he's 2 oscillators heterodyning, and you probably recognize the sound. It's kind of this sort of sci-fi, kind of annoying sound after a while. But if we just tweak the algorithm ever so slightly by applying some musical rules, we can have a very different kind of sound, which, you know, Bob has a lovely singing voice now, so at least to my Western ears. So that's what I would call context. And in terms of what we're doing to do contextual music in the future, we're working on a project for next May, which will take music as emotion, and we're looking to output that in a more contextual way. So next time you see me, you ask me what I do, I'll hopefully be able to say, I'm glad you asked me that, let's get a drink. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Amy Jo Kim, and I have a confession to make. Although I design rating systems for a living, I hate competing with other people. What I love is